I've always felt safe in my room. It's my sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world can't touch me. I have my routines, my little rituals to keep it that way. The curtains are always drawn just right, letting in the faintest sliver of light in the morning. The door is always closed and locked before I crawl into bed. Not just for privacy, but for peace of mind. Something about a closed door makes the darkness beyond feel contained, as if nothing can creep in. It's a habit, a rule I've followed for as long as I can remember. A small but vital comfort in the quiet hours of the night. And yet, as I stirred awake this morning, something was wrong. It wasn't immediately obvious, but I could feel it before I even opened my eyes. The air in the room felt heavier, colder, as if some unseen force had settled in during the night. Then I opened my eyes, and everything I thought I knew about safety shattered. The cold morning air brushes against my skin as I stir awake, pulling my blanket tighter. A sliver of pale light filters through the curtains, casting faint patterns on the wall. Everything feels still. Too still. I blink, my vision adjusting, and then I see it. The door. It's open. I stare at the doorway, my mind sluggish with disbelief. It's wide open, the edges of the frame glowing faintly with morning light spilling in from the hallway. My chest tightens. The door was closed when I went to bed. It's always closed. Always. Something prickles at the back of my neck, a visceral awareness of wrongness. My breaths come quicker, shallow, as though the air itself has turned against me. That's when I notice the smell, earthy and damp, like wet soil after a storm. My gaze drops to the floor, and my stomach lurches. Muddy footprints. They start near the foot of my bed, smudged and uneven, as though whoever made them stood there for some time. The trail leads toward the open door and into the hallway. Each step seems deliberate, the weight of the intruder's presence etched into the wooden boards. I freeze, my body sinking into the mattress. A pulse of panic beats through my veins, sharp and insistent. My mind races, struggling to process the reality of what I'm seeing. Someone was here. Someone stood at the edge of my bed while I slept. The room feels oppressive, the silence broken only by the faint creak of the house settling. No, not the house. A floorboard. From the hallway. The sound pulls my gaze back to the open door. My chest constricts, my breathing erratic. I want to run, to move, but my body refuses to obey. Every instinct screams for me to stay still. To not make a sound. The air seems heavier now, laden with something I can't name. My eyes flicker to the footprints again. There's a detail I didn't notice before, tiny flecks of mud scattered beyond the prints, as though something wet was dragged along. Another creak. Closer this time. My heart pounds against my ribs as I strain to listen. The sound is faint but deliberate, the careful shift of weight on old wood. Whoever was in my room is still here. Somewhere close. The hallway beyond the doorway is a black void, the light from my room barely penetrating its depths. My eyes dart to the shadows, searching for movement. Every nerve in my body is alight, my skin crawling with the sensation of being watched. I catch it, a flicker of movement at the edge of the doorframe. A shadow. My breath hitches, my body trembling beneath the covers. It's faint, but it's there, shifting, as if testing the boundary between the hallway and my room. The smell of earth grows stronger, more invasive. My thoughts spiral, a cacophony of questions I can't answer. How did they get in? What do they want? Are they still watching me? A faint shuffle breaks the silence, the sound of bare feet brushing against wood. My stomach knots, nausea rising in waves. My mind urges me to act, to do something, but I can't move. It's as if the weight of the room itself presses me down. The shadow at the doorway retreats, dissolving into the hallway. The floorboards groan softly, one after the other, as the sound moves farther away. Relief washes over me, tentative and fleeting. But something gnaws at me, an unease that won't let go. My gaze drifts back to the footprints. I trace their path with my eyes, from the hallway to the door, to the bed. My breath catches in my throat. The trail doesn't begin at the door. It starts here. At the edge of my bed. I clamp my eyes shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. This can't be real. It's a dream, a horrible dream, and I just need to wake up. I focus on the sound of my breathing, trying to calm the frantic rhythm. But then I hear it. A faint scraping sound. My eyes snap open, scanning the room. It's coming from the hallway, or is it? My blood runs cold as the noise grows clearer, closer. A chair leg dragging against the floor, slow and deliberate. Silence falls, heavy and deafening. I hold my breath, straining to hear anything, but the stillness is unbroken. And then, from beneath the bed, I hear it. A soft, deliberate exhale. There's something comforting about routine. It wraps around you like a security blanket, a small assurance that things are predictable, manageable. For me, my routine was simple. Work, dinner, maybe a little TV, then bed. My phone was always a part of it, a silent companion, there to check messages, scroll through social media, or stream a podcast to drown out the creaks and groans of the house at night. I lived alone, and I liked it that way. My house was small but cozy, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. The kind of place where you could leave your door unlocked, though I never did. It felt safe. Ordinary. But safety is an illusion, a fragile lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. I didn't realize that until the first text message came. It was late, and I had been half asleep, scrolling aimlessly through my phone. The vibration startled me, pulling me out of my daze. A single text, simple and strange. Why are you still awake? I had stared at the screen, confused. No name, just a number, my number. At first, I thought it was a prank, some weird glitch in the system. I even laughed a little, brushing it off as nothing. But nothing turned into something. Something I couldn't explain. And soon, I would learn that there's no such thing as safe. The first message came late last night. At first, I thought it was a mistake, some glitch in the system. A single text, innocuous enough. Why are you still awake? I had laughed it off, my tired brain chalking it up to spam. But as I stared at the sender, my heart skipped. It was my number. My own number. My first reaction was to dismiss it, a prank, maybe. But the strange unease lingered, burrowing into my mind like a splinter. By morning, I had almost forgotten about it. Almost. But as the day wore on, the memory of that text stuck with me, a nagging presence that wouldn't leave. The next message came that evening, just as I settled into bed. The screen lit up, casting its eerie glow across my room. Another message, this one impossible to ignore. You left your window unlocked. My stomach churned. I sat up immediately, my heart pounding. The window. I looked over at it, half expecting to see someone staring in. The curtains were drawn, the faint outline of the frame visible in the darkness. Swallowing hard, I got up and checked. It was unlocked. The realization hit me like a punch to the chest. My number. My phone. The message knew. I locked the window, triple-checked it, and crawled back into bed, pulling the blanket up to my chin. I told myself it was coincidence, some weird joke. But the silence in the room felt oppressive, each creak of the house making me jump. When the third message came, I couldn't pretend anymore. "You're sitting on your bed, biting your nails. You know I hate that." I froze. My fingers, mid-motion, hovered near my mouth. Slowly, I lowered my hand, the weight of dread sinking into my chest. My eyes darted around the room, scanning every shadow, every corner, as if I could find the source of the intrusion. The screen in my hand trembled as I stared at the sender, my number. No missed digits. No tricks. Just me. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My gaze flicked to the curtains, the only thing separating me from the outside. Was someone out there? Watching? My breathing quickened as I grabbed the edge of the blanket, draping it over my head like a child hiding from the monster under the bed. Another vibration. "Don't bother hiding. I see everything." A wave of nausea washed over me. I couldn't think, couldn't rationalize. My instinct screamed to turn the phone off, so I did. The screen went black, leaving me in suffocating darkness. I stuffed the phone under my pillow and lay back down, my body rigid with fear. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. I lay there, straining to hear any sound over the hammering of my heart. Then the buzzing began again, faint and persistent. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I pulled the phone out from beneath the pillow. The screen was on. I hadn't turned it back on. The messages filled the screen, one after another in rapid succession. "Why are you ignoring me? I know you're awake. Look at me." My breath hitched as my hands trembled. The messages didn't stop. Each one more frantic than the last. "Look at me." The phone's camera app opened on its own. The front-facing camera glared back at me, capturing my wide eyes, my pale, terrified face. I watched in horror as the screen froze, snapping a picture without my touch. Then the next message appeared, beautiful. Just like I thought. I threw the phone across the room, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing in the silence. The messages stopped, but the damage was done. I couldn't stay in the bed. The walls of the room felt like they were closing in. I turned on every light in the house, my footsteps echoing through the empty rooms. I didn't feel safe anywhere, but staying in the dark was worse. I checked every lock, every door, every window. I left the phone where it had landed, but its presence still haunted me. Hours passed, though it felt like years. Finally, I sat in the corner of the living room, wrapped in a blanket, clutching a knife from the kitchen. My eyes darted to every shadow, every flicker of movement. And then I heard it. The faint buzz of a notification, coming from the bedroom upstairs. My body froze. I hadn't touched the phone, hadn't even gone back into the room. Another buzz. Then another. The sound was relentless now, like a swarm of bees invading the house. Slowly, against every instinct, I rose to my feet. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs, each step louder than the last. The buzzing grew louder, more insistent, like a scream just below the surface. When I reached the bedroom door, it stopped. Silence engulfed the house, so heavy it pressed against my ears. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached for the doorknob. The door creaked open, revealing the phone lying on the floor where I had thrown it. The screen was on, but it wasn't the messages this time. It was the camera feed. The image was grainy, dark, but I could make out the details, the corner of the living room, the blanket I had left behind, the exact spot where I had been sitting moments ago. A new notification appeared on the screen, glowing with malicious intent. You shouldn't have left. I liked watching you there. Behind me, the floorboards creaked. I've never been one to explore the attic. It's one of those spaces in the house that feels like it belongs to another time, full of old boxes, forgotten trinkets, and the stale air of things long abandoned. Growing up, I'd heard my parents talk about the junk they kept up there, but I never paid it much attention. Even when I moved back into the house after they passed, the attic remained untouched, a quiet corner of the home I didn't care to disturb. But today, something pulled me toward it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was guilt for letting it sit neglected for so long. I told myself I'd only spend a few minutes up there, sorting through some boxes, finding a few mementos to keep. The ladder groaned under my weight as I climbed up, a faint beam of light slicing through the dark from the single attic window. Dust clung to every surface, swirling lazily in the still air. The room smelled of age, dry wood, musty fabric, and faintly of something metallic. I started with an unmarked box in the corner, pulling out a few old photo frames and brittle papers. It wasn't until I noticed the album, sitting alone on top of an old trunk, that my curiosity turned to unease. The leather cover was weathered, the edges frayed as though it had been handled countless times. It felt heavier than it should, a strange weight that pressed against my palms. As I opened it and flipped to the first page, I realized I wasn't holding an ordinary family album. I was holding something much worse. The air in the attic is thick and stale, the kind that clings to your skin and fills your lungs with the scent of dust and decay. I had come up here on a whim, looking for an old box of childhood keepsakes. But now, standing amidst piles of forgotten relics, I'm holding something else entirely, a photo album, its leather cover worn smooth, edges fraying with age. I don't remember ever seeing it before. The first photograph greets me with a jolt of unease. It's me, unmistakably me, sprawled across an unfamiliar couch, fast asleep. My face is slack, my mouth slightly open, completely unaware of the camera capturing that moment. The room is unrecognizable, faded floral wallpaper, a vintage lamp casting warm light, and a rug with a pattern I've never seen before. I flip the page. Another photograph, another strange setting. This time, I'm curled up on a bed with an iron headboard, my arm tucked beneath a pillow. The details are vivid, the worn quilt covering me, the cracked plaster on the walls, a faint smudge on the mirror across the room. My chest tightens. I don't know this place. I've never been here. Page after page, the photographs grow more unsettling. Me in a rocking chair by a window overlooking a darkened yard. Me on a sagging love seat with a crocheted blanket draped over me. Me lying on a mattress on the floor, bare and threadbare, the wood-paneled walls looming around me. The lighting in each image is different, but the clarity is perfect. And yet, I can't remember any of these moments. My heart pounds in my ears as I reach the final page. The last photograph stops me cold. It's my room. My bed. My blanket pulled tight around me, just as I do every night. The angle is impossibly close, taken from the side of the bed where no one should be. My breathing becomes shallow as I stare at the details, the way the dim light from the hallway slants across my face, the faint shadow of the bedside lamp on the wall. This one is recent. I know it is. My mind races. Who took these? When? How? A chill creeps up my spine, the fine hairs on the back of my neck standing at attention. The attic feels colder, darker, as though the shadows are stretching, thickening, pressing in around me. The weight of the album in my hands feels unbearable now, like it's leaching warmth from my skin. And then I hear it. The faint groan of a door opening somewhere below. The sound reverberates through the silence of the house, slow and deliberate. My body tenses, frozen in place as I strain to listen. For a moment, there's nothing but the sound of my own breathing, uneven and shallow. Then, another creak, this time closer. The album slips from my hands, landing on the attic floor with a dull thud. I step back instinctively, my pulse roaring in my ears. The wooden floor beneath me groans with the movement, as if betraying my presence. I turn my head toward the attic door. It's ajar, a sliver of the dim hallway visible beyond it. I don't remember leaving it open. The creaking sound comes again, unmistakable now. Footsteps. Heavy and deliberate, climbing the stairs. My chest tightens, every muscle screaming for me to move, but I can't. My feet feel rooted to the spot as the footsteps grow louder, the sound of each step deliberate and unhurried, like whoever is coming knows I have nowhere to go. A shadow shifts at the bottom of the attic stairs. My breath catches in my throat, my vision blurring with the rush of fear. The silhouette stretches, dark and human-shaped, the outline flickering in the dim light. I take a step back, my heel catching on the edge of the fallen album. My balance falters, and I catch myself on a dusty box, the sound loud enough to echo. The footsteps stop. For a moment, there's silence again. Thick, oppressive, almost suffocating. Then, the sound of a whisper. Low, just barely audible, but close. Too close. I don't wait to hear more. My legs finally obey, and I bolt, shoving past the attic door and slamming it shut behind me. My feet pound down the stairs, the air rushing past me as I take them two at a time. I don't stop until I'm in the living room, my back pressed against the far wall, my chest heaving. The house is silent again, but I can still feel it, the presence, the weight of unseen eyes watching. I glance toward the staircase. The attic door is open again, just a crack. Enough to see a sliver of darkness beyond. And then my phone buzzes in my pocket. With trembling hands, I pull it out, my stomach sinking as I see the notification. One new photo. It's me, standing in the living room, staring at the phone. Behind me, the attic door hangs wide open. I've always hated voicemails. There's something unsettling about them, like little ghosts trapped in your phone, waiting to be let out. Most of the time, I ignore them, letting the notifications pile up until they become background noise. But tonight, something made me check. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling absent-mindedly through my phone, when the missed call notification appeared. No number, just the word unknown. My first instinct was to ignore it, but then I saw the voicemail. My thumb hovered over the icon for a moment too long, a knot of unease twisting in my stomach. I shouldn't have listened. The first sound was static, low and crackling like an old radio. Then came the voice, my asterisk voice, distorted but unmistakable. It was frantic, broken by heavy breathing and raw, guttural panic. Help me. Please. It's coming. The words sent a jolt through my chest, each one tinged with desperation I couldn't reconcile with myself. The scream that followed was the worst part. It was piercing, primal, the kind of sound that doesn't come from pain but pure, unfiltered terror. Then, silence. I sat there frozen, the phone trembling in my hand. The message ended abruptly, leaving only the lingering hiss of static in my mind. My surroundings seemed to shift, the soft glow of the lamp feeling cold and clinical. The creak of the house settling sent my nerves spiraling. I replayed the message, hoping it would sound different the second time. It didn't. It was still me. Still screaming. My heart thudded against my ribs as I stared at the screen, the voicemail icon glowing like a malevolent eye. My own voice, crying for help. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. I hadn't made that call. My eyes flicked to the windows. The curtains were drawn, but the faint gap between them felt like an invitation for something to peer through. For someone. I tightened my grip on the phone and stood, every muscle in my body tense. I told myself I was being paranoid, that there had to be an explanation. Maybe it was a prank, some bizarre trick. I wanted to believe that. But the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. The phone buzzed in my hand, snapping me out of my thoughts. A new notification. Another voicemail. My thumb hovered over the screen. I didn't want to press play, but I couldn't stop myself. Static greeted me again, louder this time, like a storm raging through the speaker. Then the voice returned, trembling and breathless. "Why didn't you help me?" My breath caught in my throat. It was me again, but quieter, almost pleading. There was no scream this time, just those 5 words. I dropped the phone, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing in the suffocating silence. My pulse roared in my ears as I backed away, my gaze flicking to every corner of the room. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the walls were closing in. A sudden noise shattered the quiet, a knock at the front door. It wasn't frantic or loud, just 3 measured, deliberate knocks. I froze, my mind racing. No one was supposed to come over. It was late, too late for visitors. Another knock, louder this time. I glanced at the phone on the floor. The screen lit up with a new notification. Another voicemail. My stomach twisted as I bent down, my fingers fumbling to unlock the screen. The message played automatically. This time, there was no static, no screaming. Just my voice, calm and steady, with a chilling finality. "Don't open the door." The knock stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was heavy, charged, like the world itself was holding its breath. My eyes darted to the door, the shadows beneath it still and unmoving. And then the phone buzzed again. The screen displayed a single word, unknown. A call. My hand shook as I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the answer button. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The call ended. A new voicemail appeared. The screen felt impossibly cold as I played it, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The message began with a whisper, my voice barely audible. "I told you not to open it." A loud crash came from the back of the house, followed by the sound of shattering glass. My body jolted, the phone slipping from my grasp. I turned toward the noise, my heart hammering in my chest. Whatever was coming, it wasn't at the door anymore. It was already inside. Nights in the countryside are supposed to be peaceful. That's why I moved out here, to escape the noise, the chaos, the constant hum of the city. My nearest neighbor is half a mile away, and most nights, the loudest sound is the rustling of leaves or the occasional hoot of an owl. It's a quiet that seeps into your bones, comforting and absolute. But tonight, that quiet feels wrong. It started just after midnight. I had been in bed, half asleep, when I heard it, barking. Sharp, repetitive, echoing from the backyard. The sound jolted me upright, my pulse immediately spiking. It wasn't just startling, it didn't make sense. I don't have a dog. I sit frozen in bed, straining to listen. The barking continues, loud and insistent, each bark perfectly spaced like a metronome. It sounds close, too close. My mouth feels dry as I swing my legs over the side of the bed, the wooden floor cold against my feet. The room feels larger somehow, darker, as I fumble for my phone. No notifications. No missed calls. I flick on the flashlight and make my way to the window, the beam of light cutting through the shadows of my room. The backyard is bathed in silver moonlight, the trees swaying gently in the wind. My garden chair sits tipped over on the patio, the only sign of disturbance. I squint, scanning the yard for movement, and then I see it. A shape, low to the ground, pacing near the tree line. My heart skips. It's too dark to make out details, but it looks like a dog, medium-sized, maybe a lab or a shepherd mix. The barking stops abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. The figure freezes, its head snapping in my direction. My breath catches in my throat. It's not just looking at the house, it's looking at me. I step back from the window, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The sound feels deafening in the stillness, and I wince, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure doesn't move. It just stands there, watching. And then it starts again. The barking erupts, louder this time, reverberating through the walls of the house. But something about it is off. It's too precise, too clean, like a sound bite on repeat. I clutch the edge of the window frame, my knuckles whitening. Suddenly, the barking cuts out mid-bark, as if someone flipped a switch. My stomach churns. I wait, counting the seconds in the silence, every muscle in my body tensed. Then the sound comes again, but it's not barking this time. It's a voice. My voice. Let me in. The words float up from the backyard, faint but unmistakable. My knees weaken, and I grip the windowsill for support. I can't process what I just heard. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. Let me in. The voice comes again, louder, more insistent. I stare out the window, my flashlight trembling in my hand. The shape near the trees is gone. My phone buzzes on the nightstand, the sudden vibration making me jump. I scramble to grab it, fumbling with the screen. A notification, one new voicemail. My fingers shake as I press play. Static fills my ears at first, sharp and grating, and then my own voice cuts through. Why won't you open the door? I drop the phone, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. A loud thud echoes through the house, followed by another. It's coming from downstairs, from the back door. I creep toward the bedroom door, every step careful and deliberate. My ears strain to catch the slightest noise as I peek into the hallway. The house is dark, the only light coming from the sliver of moonlight spilling through the stairwell window. Another thud. I can hear it clearly now, someone, or something, pounding on the back door. The rhythmic knocking is slow, deliberate, and impossibly strong. My mind races. I have no dog. I live alone. I double-check the bedroom lock, my fingers trembling as I twist it. And then I hear the voice again. Let me in. This time, it's coming from just outside my bedroom door. My legs buckle, and I backpedal until I hit the wall, my hands flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The doorknob rattles, and the voice speaks again, calm and patient. You're making this harder than it needs to be. The door doesn't open, but the sound of scratching fills the room. It's slow at first, like fingernails trailing down the wood, but it grows louder, more frantic. The sound is unbearable, nails dragging and digging into the door, splintering the wood. I don't know what to do. I can't move. My body feels paralyzed by fear. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the scratching stops. The silence that follows is deafening, thick with tension. I wait, holding my breath, my ears straining for any sound. My phone buzzes again. Another voicemail. With trembling hands, I pick it up and press play. The message is short, just 3 words, spoken in my voice. I'm already inside. The air shifts behind me, and the light flickers out. I had always dreamed of visiting this country. The ancient streets, the vibrant markets, the rich history, it felt like a place where stories come alive. I'd finally saved enough to take the trip. The excitement bubbling inside me was palpable as I stepped off the plane, adjusting to the humid air. I was alone, but that was part of the charm. I was ready to experience everything, to be swept away by this new world. But from the moment I stepped into the taxi at the airport, everything changed. The taxi was waiting right outside, just as I had been told. A black sedan with tinted windows, the driver sitting inside with his head down, his features obscured by shadow. My heart was light with anticipation, eager to see the city, to start my adventure. I didn't think twice when I climbed into the back seat, and the door clicked shut behind me with a soft thud. The driver didn't say anything. The car smelled faintly of stale air and leather, the windows rolled up against the night. I sank into the plush seat, watching the airport lights fade as we drove away, the road smooth beneath the tires. The city's skyline was barely visible in the distance, a blur of lights against the dark sky. But something felt off. I couldn't place it at first. The silence in the car was too thick, like the air itself had grown heavy. The driver's hands rested motionless on the steering wheel, and his eyes were hidden behind the rearview mirror. I watched the world pass by through the window, the streets becoming unfamiliar as we left the city behind. The buildings turned into warehouses, then into stretches of trees and fields I didn't recognize. A knot tightened in my stomach. The road twisted in ways that felt wrong, as if we were heading farther away from the heart of the city, deeper into an unknown part of the country. I glanced at the driver's reflection in the rearview mirror, but his face remained obscured. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I turned my attention back to the outside, hoping it was just my nerves getting the better of me. But the trees now seemed to loom closer, their silhouettes darker, the road too empty. No cars. No lights. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythmic sound of tires against asphalt. I should have said something, done something, but I couldn't. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened inside the car, and I found it harder to breathe. The city seemed miles away, and I couldn't help but wonder why we were heading in this direction. I pressed my hand against the window, trying to focus on anything other than the growing panic in my chest. The streetlights grew fewer, the darkness surrounding us deeper. I glanced again at the driver, but still, I couldn't see his face. That's when I noticed it, the sound. A soft, steady noise, barely audible over the hum of the engine. A faint tapping, like fingers drumming on the window, but it wasn't coming from the outside. My blood ran cold. I turned my head, slowly, but the back seat was empty. My heart slammed against my ribcage. The tapping continued, growing louder now, but I couldn't see where it was coming from. My eyes darted around, searching the shadows of the car, the edges of the seats. It was inside the car. I looked back at the driver again, my pulse thundering in my ears. Was he doing this? No. His hands were still on the wheel. His face remained hidden. The tapping grew frantic, each tap more urgent, more frantic, echoing in the car's confined space. I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but my throat felt dry, constricted. The air was so thick now, suffocating, and the tapping grew faster, relentless. I felt something cold brush against my arm, a chill that cut through my jacket like ice. My eyes widened, but before I could react, the tapping stopped, leaving behind a suffocating silence. Then, without warning, the car swerved sharply, pulling off the road and into the trees. My body jerked forward, the seatbelt cutting into my chest as I struggled to stay upright. The tires screeched, and the car came to a violent halt, throwing me against the door. The engine died. For a moment, there was only silence. I tried to catch my breath, but my heart wouldn't slow, and the world outside the window was nothing but thick, oppressive darkness. My eyes darted between the rearview mirror and the door, every nerve screaming to escape. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed, my body frozen, as if something unseen was holding me there, keeping me in place. And then I saw it. A face. It wasn't the driver's. The face was pale, almost ghostly, with hollow eyes staring back at me from the rearview mirror. The face was so close, I could feel the cold breath on my skin. My stomach churned, and I fought for breath, but my body refused to move. The face didn't smile. It didn't speak. It just stared. I don't remember how I got out of the car. I don't know how long I stood there, in the middle of nowhere, with only the darkness and the trees for company. My legs gave way beneath me, and I collapsed onto the cold ground, trembling, unable to comprehend what had just happened. When I finally looked up, the car was gone. The streetlights were back, and I was standing on a busy city street, surrounded by people, but the feeling of the car's presence lingered. That cold, suffocating presence. I'm not sure how I made it back to the hotel that night, or if I ever truly left the car. The memory blurs, but one thing is clear, I never took another taxi in this country again. I never intended to stay in a motel for long, but I had no choice. My car broke down, and the town I found myself in didn't offer much in the way of options. The motel was cheap, and the room, while old and musty, was clean enough. I figured it would be fine for a couple of nights, just long enough to get the car repaired. But something about the place felt off from the start. The air was thick with a strange tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the repairs, but my neighbors, the ones in the rooms beside me, made me feel uneasy. It wasn't anything specific, just a sense that something wasn't quite right. The woman in the room next to mine never left. I saw her through the thin curtains, always moving around the room in a way that seemed too deliberate, too controlled. The other room, across the hall, was empty most of the time, but I occasionally heard strange sounds coming from it at night. And then, one night, I heard something I couldn't ignore. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels suffocating. I had just settled into bed, the hum of the old air conditioner keeping me company, when I heard it. A soft noise at first, just a thud against the wall that separated my room from the one next door. I ignored it, figuring it was just the building settling. But then it happened again. Thud. Thud. A rhythmic banging, like someone was trying to get someone's attention. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. It wasn't just a noise. It sounded like someone was struggling, pushing against the wall with force. Panic surged through me. I looked at the clock, 1:42 a.m. too late for a normal disturbance, too early for my neighbors to be up. I held my breath, listening intently, trying to make sense of the sound. The banging stopped abruptly, and for a moment, everything went still. My eyes flicked to the door, the only exit from the room. I felt trapped, as though something was holding me here, keeping me from moving. Then, I heard a muffled voice. It was faint at first, distorted by the wall between us, but it was definitely there. A voice, low and strained, almost like it was being choked out. The words were unclear, but the tone, utter fear, was unmistakable. My heart raced as I debated with myself. Should I call the front desk? Should I leave the room? But something kept me rooted to the spot. I had to know what was going on. Maybe it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone needed help. I threw off the blankets and grabbed my shoes, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the doorknob. The hallway outside was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the vending machine at the far end. I hesitated for a moment, but my feet carried me toward the room next door, the one where the noise had come from. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to peek inside. I leaned in, my breath shallow, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The room was empty. At first, I thought I had misheard the sounds, or maybe I had imagined them. The bed was neatly made, the floor spotless. The air was stale, heavy with dust, and the light flickered overhead. But then my eyes caught something strange. On the far side of the room, near the closet, there was a shape. A dark, twisted figure huddled in the corner. At first, I thought it was just a pile of clothes or a coat hanging too closely to the wall. But as I took another step forward, I saw it more clearly. It wasn't a coat. It was a person, no, something that looked like a person. The figure was crouched down, its arms wrapped tightly around its knees, its head tilted unnaturally to one side. The skin was pale, almost ghostly, and there was a faint, red stain on the floor beneath it. A trail of something darker, something that looked like blood, led from the figure to the bed. I froze, my heart racing as my mind tried to make sense of what I was seeing. This wasn't right. None of this was right. Before I could move, the figure turned its head slowly, its eyes locking onto mine. The face was contorted, not human anymore, twisted into something grotesque and hollow. There was no emotion, no recognition in its eyes, just an empty, hollow stare. The sound of footsteps behind me made me jerk around. I turned, my breath catching in my throat, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty, silent as ever. But when I looked back into the room, the figure was gone. I backed away from the door, my legs shaking beneath me. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened, but my body was already moving, pulling me away from the room. I didn't stop to think. I didn't look back. I just ran. I don't remember how I got back to my room, but I locked the door behind me, bolted it shut, and sat in the corner, my back pressed against the wall. The silence was deafening. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. I tried to convince myself it was a dream, that I had imagined the whole thing. But when I dared to glance at the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The lights in the motel next door were on now, and a figure stood in the window, staring back at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stared back. And then, slowly, the figure smiled.